For me, it was the culture shift. I was walking into a culture that I wasn't very familiar with since I'd been surrounded by military people for basically my entire adult life, counting my time at the military academy. And so just figuring out where the new lines were, what was cool, what wasn't, how to have the best, most effective communication with people, all of that stuff seemed like a very daunting task, especially coming out of, serving for basically 10 years straight in the South and then being back on the West Coast. It was quite the learning curve for me.
God, there's so many things. Well, I can first say that joining the military had a vision, but the best part it's been extending me and pushing me to do more. It's not just about doing my job, but it's about doing the best I can do with my job. Serving my peers, knowing people who have helped me become a better person, taking roles that I never thought I would, pushing me beyond my limits of what I can do. I remember when I first started as a nurse, and within 6 months, they're like, "You're gonna be a charge nurse." I'm like, I'm just learning my role as a nurse itself, but becoming an officer and being a leading officer has been more than what I expected.
Thinking through that question and realizing if my change happened, would I exist? And for me, that's such an existential question to answer because being multiracial, I believe I would go back and have slavery never happen. How does that affect America today? As we look at the geopolitical situation, looking at my little brother as he grows up, a person of color with black skin and the things that he's gone through, and then looking at myself as a person of color with white skin and realizing that making that sacrifice and making that change would be something that's so important and dear to my heart, as well as to help America heal.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, where you're from, and your branch of service?
Sure. I'm Skylar Brown from San Jose, California. I served for 9 years and 9 months as an Army officer all over the South, pretty much. I got one major trip to Afghanistan and then other trips to Korea, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and a few other places while I was in the Army.
My name is Jennifer Francis. I am from Cupertino, California. And I have been in the military since 2007, so a little bit over 11 years now, and I'm currently active duty Navy nurse.
My name is David Coombs, served in the Marine Corps Reserves for 6 years, did one deployment, 7 months to Iraq in 2005, came back, got out in 2006. I'm originally from Texas. My dad was in the Air Force, so I was an Air Force brat, moved around a lot. So I'd say I'm from Eastern Washington. That's kind of where we ended up, and then I've lived in Seattle for the last 10 years or so.
My name's Brian Young. I grew up in New York on Long Island, just east of New York City. Joined the military after high school, enlisted as an infantryman in the Army for 5 years. Got out in 2008, and then I went and got my undergraduate degree from University of Washington. Went into the consumer packaged goods industry from there, and then came back for my master's in business, where I've been the last 2 years.
Yeah, my name's Andrew Pepler. I am from Pensacola, Florida originally. I served for 8 years on active duty and 2 years in the reserves in the U.S. Army as an infantry officer.
Robert A. White. I joined the military in the U.S. Army in 1997, served till September 2017. Just a little bit over 20 years. Originally born in Mount Home Air Force Base, Idaho, but being a military brat, grew up just about basically everywhere overseas, multiple places in the United States. Coming from a lineage of those who served since the Civil War, it's just basically what was in my blood.
And did you end up deploying while you were?
Yeah, just about everybody ends up deploying. For myself, I had two deployments to Kuwait, multiple deployments, different ones overseas to Southeast Asia, to Pacific areas. Predominantly spent my last part of my career in Pacific arena.
So tell us about any deployments overseas and what those were like.
Yeah, so I had 3 tours in Afghanistan. Once originally in 2007, I went over for 15 months, served in Paktika on the border with Pakistan. My second was in Wardak for 6 months, and then I went back a third time in 2012 to Kandahar for a 9-month tour as a company commander.
I went on the USNS Comfort in 2015. It was a 6-month deployment, and we toured and provided medical and surgical aid to 11 different countries.
Wow. Which were some of the highlight countries?
The highlight countries would be Honduras. It's beautiful. The people were very appreciative of our assistance and our aid, and we also were able to get a view of the culture and explore around. Jamaica also, because we did a lot of partnerships with the nurses and the providers to understand how they provide assistance to their patients, and they also came aboard our ship to fully understand how we processed our equipments as I worked in sterilize receive department.
And do you have family now?
I do. My husband, Joseph, is a wonderful, supportive, loving husband. We've been married since 2008, and we have 3 beautiful girls, Paige, who's 6, almost 7, Clara, who's 5, and Grace, who is 2, and a dog, Marley. He's 8. He's our firstborn.
I do. I mean, my parents are still around, a couple brothers, and then I have my partner, and I have a son who's almost 2 years old. He's going to be 2 years in about 2 weeks now.
Yeah, so I have a wife and 2 kids now, 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. Didn't have any when I was in the military. Then I got out and met my wife out here in Washington, and loving her ever since.
I do have family now, wife, Melly, and then 2 kids.
And how'd you and Melly meet?
We met in the Army, actually. We had a year-long trip to Korea. She was in Delta Battery, I was in Bravo Battery, and we got to know each other fairly well there, and we carried that relationship back to Fort Hood, and the rest is history.
So other than meeting Melly, what was the best part about being in the military?
I think I have 2 best parts of being in the military. I loved the amount of responsibility that we were trusted with. And I also love the camaraderie, being able to know for sure that the person to your left or to your right was 100% sold out, and your success and the mission's success is a feeling that I still miss today.
God, there's so many things. Well, I can first say that joining the military had a vision, but the best part it's been extending me and pushing me to do more. It's not just about doing my job, but it's about doing the best I can do with my job, serving my peers, knowing people who have helped me become a better person, taking roles that I never thought I would, pushing me beyond my limits of what I can do. I remember when I first started as a nurse, and within 6 months, they're like, "You're gonna be a charge nurse." I'm like, I'm just learning my role as a nurse itself, but becoming an officer and being a leading officer has been more than what I expected.
I think for me, the best part about being in the military was the people that you work with, kind of the camaraderie that you share and the bonds that you build with other people. For me, it was unlike any other job that I had. I mean, you just get close to the people that you work with, especially if you're on a deployment with people. You spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with them. Depend a lot on them, and that's just not something that you get outside of the military, really.
Do you miss those folks that you served with?
I do miss them quite a bit. I mean, I'm glad I'm out now for many reasons. But I definitely miss the friends that I had, keep in touch with some of them, but don't get to see them near as much as I wish that I could.
That's such a great question, because for myself, being in the military, growing up in it and seeing like what my family, my mom, my brother, my dad, like everybody, like the camaraderie, just being able to go to certain events and knowing that those that come up shake, my dad's hand, my mom's hand, thanking them. It was, looking at them as my heroes, and then being in that situation myself, being around my brothers and sisters in arms, being able to lead soldiers, both as an enlisted as an officer, that was truly leading, I think, was the greatest thing I could do in my career.
And do you miss it?
Yeah, that's such a, as you probably even told, it's such a loaded question because yes, I do miss it. With missing it, I stay in touch with not just those that, I served with, those of my subordinates, even peers and those I worked for. I continue my support in the community with veterans, anywhere from, working with employment, readiness assistance, to just anything they need someone to talk to for mentorship.
Yeah, so for me, it was definitely the opportunity to serve and lead my soldiers and get to know the men under my command. I met so many people from across the entire country, from all different walks of life, ethnicities, religions, backgrounds. It was just an incredible team environment. And if anybody got a chance to play sports growing up, it was a lot like that, except it was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on one of the best possible teams that you could ever serve on. If I miss one thing, it's definitely the mission focus and the team camaraderie that I experienced in the infantry.
Probably camaraderie, having like a bunch of guys that I would do anything for. So just being able to really rely on people and trust somebody when they say they would do something. So I think that's probably one of the things I found a little bit outside of the military, but not as much as in the military.
And what did you study here at the University of Washington?
So here at the University of Washington, I had the opportunity as I was leaving the Army to apply to the Evans School, to their executive master's of public administration. And it was just such an amazing program that opened up my eyes for me.
I studied public administration with you, and then also did second master's in global health. My work in global health mostly focuses on nutrition, mostly global malnutrition, undernutrition, people who don't get enough food to eat or enough nutrients in their food. I focus a lot on international development and agricultural policy at the Evans School.
I'm graduating here in a couple weeks with a dual master's in public administration and business administration, so from the Evans School and the Foster School of Business. I was motivated to go back to school because I realized that in order to get into management or senior management as a civilian, I really needed to build some additional skills on top of the leadership experience that I had in the military. And UW was right in my backyard here in Seattle. I was working at Amazon at the time. I had access to the 9/11 GI Bill. So it was really a no-brainer to come back to school and really invest in myself and try to build more skills to be successful in my career. So what motivated you to go back to school?
I was motivated to go back to school after my experience on the USNS Comfort. We were on the ship and I was leading my department of sterilized receiving, and the equipments were breaking down. I had to collaborate with a lot of personnel on the ship, and I realized at that point that I need to strengthen my business acumen, have a better overview of the operations. After many years as a nurse, strengthening my nursing skills, I realized that I could not rely on my nursing skills anymore, and I had to go back to school and to push a different side of my nursing that I had never before.
I knew that I was going to be leaving the Army and I wanted to be doing something that I was passionate about in the private sector. But in order to excel at that, I also knew that I didn't have the frameworks that would give me the best shot at fulfilling my potential as someone who is working in the private sector. So I ended up applying to business school and then becoming a business school student to build those frameworks and then sort of change my mindset from being an Army officer to being someone who can do a very good job in a niche inside the private sector.
I guess I just feel that with all the resources that we have in this world, the amount of money and development that we have, certainly there's enough food to feed everybody in the world. So why is that not happening? Why are there people who don't have enough food, especially kids? I mean, there's so many kids in this country and outside of this country who just don't have access to the right kind of nutrition. And then especially since I had a kid, kind of made things hit more close to home for me. I mean, my kid is very privileged and obviously has enough food and nutrition. He's well taken care of. I like to think so. But I mean, there's just so many kids out there that aren't, and that's just kind of the basic building blocks of life, of how you need to situate yourself in order to succeed in anything in life. You need to start with adequate nutrition and adequate development.
So you've now come back to campus twice, including undergrad and now with the MBA.
Yeah.
But what was the hardest thing for you about coming back on campus after the military?
Yeah, I think it was probably time management. So as an infantry enlisted guy, we were just told what to do, where to be somewhere 15 minutes early to 15 minutes early kind of thing. And so once I got out and I went to college, it was a lot harder to try to plan everything and make sure I was getting everything done. I got to sleep in till like 10 o'clock every day, which was awesome. But then also I just had to find like an internal drive to move forward, because otherwise there was no one going to push me to achieve in college. So
For me, it was the culture shift. I was walking into a culture that I wasn't very familiar with, since I'd been surrounded by military people for basically my entire adult life, counting my time at the military academy. And so just figuring out where the new lines were, what was cool, what wasn't, how to have the best, most effective communication with people, all of that stuff seemed like a very daunting task, especially coming out of, serving for basically 10 years straight in the South and then being back on the West Coast. It was quite the learning curve for me.
Well, as your classmate, I can tell you I didn't really think that you struggled a whole lot with that, but
Thank you. I'm glad I kept it all up here.
Well, first I was very excited. But once I stepped on, I realized that the past decade I've been in this military culture, and the language I was speaking is very different from my students. So being able to transfer my experiences on the military lingo was a little hurdle, but it wasn't long before my students, my classmates were just hands-on and wanting to learn more about my experiences, and same for me to their experiences.
Oh man, that's a good question. For me, I mean, getting back into school was a little challenging, but I had tried school actually before I joined the military, and it didn't work out well for me at all. It was a disaster, and I dropped out after half a quarter. And when I came back, actually, it was a lot different. I actually enjoyed school quite a bit more. I don't really feel like it was overly challenging. I came back, and my experiences in the military and kind of the way I had grown in the 6 years really prepared me well to go back to school, and actually really enjoyed it a lot. I got this feeling like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like. This is actually kind of enjoyable. I really like what I'm doing here. So I'd like to focus not really on the challenges, but on the benefits of joining the military and then going to school afterwards.
So walking on campus, I think for me the hardest thing would be 20 years military, coming out mid-30s, coming on a campus where most people, are in their teenagers, late teens, early 20s, graduating, even graduate students in their mid-20s, and trying to find where do I fit in that identity? It is that an identity I need to fit in. But being in the executive program was, where I needed to be, being with those who had 10 years plus of experience, those who already were continually working, and then being around them and having that new identity is actually what made a great difference for me being on campus.
yeah, I felt old. I just, and not just in name, but also just in terms of life experience. 10 years of professional experience in the military and at Amazon prior to going back to grad school, and 2.5 hard years in Afghanistan. I just felt really tired, and I felt like emotionally a lot older than a lot of my classmates. I like to play the game Where Were You on May 5th, 2007, which is the day that my boots first hit the ground in Afghanistan, which was a year to the day after I graduated undergrad. And I think it surprises a lot of people because many of them were either just starting high school or weren't even in high school yet, some of my classmates. So yeah, I think the age gap, the experience gap was the biggest challenge for me to get over, because I wanted to be able to relate with my classmates in some way, and that was a real struggle for a number of years. And what's been your most rewarding experience as a student?
I think the study tour I just did when I went to Jerusalem, it was just unbelievable to be able to go there and learn about other businesses overseas and how they deal with the situation, the geopolitical situation they're in. Coming from America, it's a lot harder. I think even being to Iraq and seeing the situation that they're in, it was like unbelievable of how much harder trying to do business could be than it would be in America, if that makes sense.
What type of companies did you see when you were in Israel?
So we got to go see Google, we got to go see Waze and talk to their number 4 employee, which was just wild. It was really cool. It was just a really cool dude talking about how they came up with the whole idea and how they put things into place. We got to go to a desalination plant, which was really, really neat, seeing them just pump water out of the ocean and turn it into drinking water. And then, we got to go see the old city of Jerusalem. We got to go see the Dead Sea and go floating. It was just an incredible, everything you could hope to do in Israel was what we got to do. It was just fantastic.
I'll have to pick 2 again. For me personally, it was going into the summer at Goldman and then finding that almost all of the classes that I'd taken here at Foster benefited me in some way as I was doing my job. Whether that was working the yield curve for bonds or explaining to someone how they could more effectively market their own idea, knowing that all of the work that I'd put in the first year meant something in the summer was very powerful for me. And then from a community perspective, when the first years came in and they had questions, maybe not about finance or anything that I'd done, but questions in general, being able to help them out and show them what our Husky culture is like, and then watch them perform, hopefully with some things that I've been helpful with, was very rewarding for me.
The most rewarding experience as a student at UW has been to pause and reflect on my experiences, my leadership abilities. One of our nursing core values is being a transformational leader, and being at Foster has taken that to another level. It's not just being about transformational leader, it's finding my authentic leadership and being able to have this time to figure out what drives me, what my values are, has been extremely rewarding.
I think my most rewarding experience as a student was, as you leave the military, you feel like you're going to lose that identity. The first week of foundations, we talk about transitions and what do transitions look like. And for myself, I was going through 7 different transitions at the same time, from leaving the military, family, medical, starting graduate school. And going to a place that I didn't expect many veterans to be at, and especially a public administration program. Most of my peers are going to the business school, and I was going the other route to public administration. So the most rewarding then was being able to build that new identity with a cohort that was like-minded, that was able to accept me and then build me up and understand, help me with that transition.
Most rewarding experiences. I'd say that I've been really fortunate. I've had a lot of really good experiences, a lot of really good opportunities in school. I got to work with Path on a nutrition project in Myanmar. I got to work as a research assistant at the Evans School. I got to work as an undergrad in the biology department. I spent 6 months studying penguins in Argentina. So I've had all these opportunities that, first of all, wouldn't have probably been possible had I not joined the military, had I gone to my undergraduate straight from high school without any kind of experience. But for me, I guess the most rewarding opportunity is through all the mentors that I've had. That so many people, the people that I worked for in biology or in public policy, the people who run these programs in these labs, just first of all giving me the opportunity to work and gain some experience in all these, and just, I've learned so much from them, and I've had such good experience and felt so supported, especially when I had my kid after the first year of grad school, so it was kind of tough. A really tough transition, but the boss, the person I was working for, was really understanding, gave me as much time as I needed, had a really flexible schedule, and just kind of supported me and kind of supported my development throughout the rest of grad school. So I would say that the connections I made with the faculty and staff that I've worked with, and then also the other students that I've worked with, I just felt really supported and had a really good atmosphere.
So reflecting back a little bit on all of the life experience that you've had, both here in the States, in the military, in training, deploying overseas, this travel, this great experience that you also had in Israel and having gone back to school twice now. What is the change that you've kind of seen in America over time? And can you reflect on that a little bit?
I'm not sure if this is because I'm just older and I notice more of it now, or if it's always been like this, but it just becomes more polarized, I think, with everything going on with like the Republicans and Democrats and fights over that. And I think it was like maybe even more pronounced because I grew up in New York in a very conservative family, and then I joined the military, which is a very conservative place, more likely, or more often than not. And then I came out to Washington, which is probably one of the most liberal places I could go. And then I've been in colleges in this liberal town. And so I've been kind of all over the place with like my political beliefs, and I feel like it's harder now to talk to somebody without getting into a fight than it used to be, where I used to be able to like talk about why I felt something or believed something, and now I feel like I'm like on pins and needles, or like really wary of telling somebody what I believe, because I just know it might like ruin a relationship or a friendship, or just make people like never want to talk to me again. So I feel like a lot tougher now, and it might be because when I was younger, I didn't really care what people thought, and maybe now I do. So I don't know if that has a lot to do with it, or maybe I'm just wiser and I realize how much of a dummy I was. I don't know. It's an interesting transition, though.
So for me, I just had the terrible misfortune to get stationed in Italy initially, straight out of school. As a 23-year-old kid, and so my first two deployments were actually to Afghanistan from Italy. So I spent the first 3.5 years of my career overseas, between Europe and Afghanistan, and so the change for me was stark coming back to the U.S. When I first left, we were still using a lot of email to communicate with one another, and then when I came back, social media had just blown up completely and become something that I didn't even recognize. And we were just at the time still starting to see the beginnings of polarization. We were well past the kind of halcyon days, honeymoon after 9/11, where it was all kumbaya and we were all one America again. And that was with the invasion of Iraq and all of the divisiveness that occurred as a result of the fallout there. It was just a different country when I came back. And there was the recession as well, which was a huge factor affecting people's income, their livelihood, their happiness on a daily basis. So it was really tough, actually, because I knew that I had gone to fight overseas for perhaps an idealized America that never existed in the first place, but at the same time it was this thing in my head, and I came home to this incredibly divisive environment where people were at each other's throats and lacked a lot of empathy and sympathy for one another. And I felt like the war that I had fought overseas had come home to roost here in the States, and it was really hard to grapple with.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's hard to kind of separate the change that I see in America from the change that's happened to me in those 10 years, or how much of that is America actually changing, or am I noticing the changes, or am I just changing and seeing different things? I mean, you probably hear this a lot, but I feel like America is so much more divided now than it was 10 years ago. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing at this point. I don't know if it's just some people are kind of recognizing, or some people's voices are being heard more that we're kind of raising these issues before, or we're actually kind of splitting, and I don't know what's really leading into that. I could blame social media or all sorts of issues, but yeah, I feel like it's divided, although I think in some ways that's good, and in some ways that's a huge problem, and we need to figure out some solutions to kind of bring people back together.
So predominantly my first 12 years of my life, I lived overseas, and not knowing what it looked like here in the United States, not knowing what it looked like in America. Coming back to the U.S., I first state I lived in was Louisiana, and I always remember David Duke was running for governor. It was just such a contentious time in the United States. And being multiracial, my father being black, mom being white, it was just like, oh, this is like the norm. I expected that. And, realizing truly what racism was, it's seen at, 11 years old. It's just, it's definitely a smack in the face in understanding at such, young age and realizing that had been, sheltered in other parts of the world. And then, fast forward growing up over that next, 10, 15, 20 years in the military, it just coming back and forth. I expected things to change and realizing things haven't changed. It's still the same. It's just been hidden. There's same racial identities, the contentiousness that we have in America, the divisiveness is still there, regardless of, as time goes on.
If you had a magic wand and you could change whatever you wanted in the U.S., what would you change and why?
Yeah, I wrote that question and I'm struggling with how to answer it. But for me, one of the biggest problems that's facing the United States is income inequality. And I don't know that I would necessarily wave a magic wand and give everybody the same salary, because I consider myself somewhat left-leaning politically, but I don't know that I would completely abandon the capitalist system overnight. But, that's some of my old school sensibilities. But yeah, I think if I had a magic wand, I would in some way try to make our tax system more equitable in this country. I feel like that is a huge piece where we're seeing government agencies and departments that are essentially resource starved, where we could be doing the most good and affecting children in early stage development, the poorest of the poor in the United States, and actually being the rising tide that lifts all boats and setting the example once again to the rest of the world, that when we talk about being American, we mean that we're taking care of each other, and that it's not just every man or every woman for themselves. We mean it when we say that we are one nation indivisible, and that we take care of each other. So yeah, I think income inequality would be the first issue that I tackle.
So if I had a magic wand in the U.S., actually around the world, I would make sure that all kids had access to the same kind of education. And again, funding is just part of that. Obviously, there's things beyond funding that go into education, but at least we could start out with, as a society, deciding that we're going to fund every child's education the same. And then, and my second one is I'm really interested in nutrition. So it's a huge problem both here in the U.S. and abroad, around the world. It's amazing. It's amazing the number of children who are malnourished, even in a country like the U.S., where we have all these resources. So I would invest more in nutrition programs. Try to make sure that no child goes to bed hungry. Everybody gets enough food, and the right kind of food, adequate, appropriate, culturally appropriate food. That's a big challenge. If I had a magic wand, I would just make that happen rather than worrying about what policies need to get put into place to actually make that a reality.
Our society has been moving at a fast pace, and just being in business school, you're just seeing technology change and adapt and grow. It's fast. And after having kids, I'm seeing society changing with that. If I had a magic wand, I would hope that people would pause more, really take a look at the people right next to you, see from their perspective and how they're seeing the change, to be able to understand what's going on with them and to understand the society around us.
I think I'd want people just to be more empathetic and understand, be more willing to ask questions of each other. So being open to, instead of coming to conclusions, talking to people more and saying hey, why do you think that? I don't know if there's a way to institute that even with a magic wand. Be change everybody's mind of you will ask more questions. But I feel like I've found that since I've been doing that, I come to understand people a little bit better and try to understand where they're coming from with their beliefs. And that's been really helpful for me. So I'd love to be able to institute that somehow, which, that doesn't sound like it's feasible, but if I have a magic wand, I'll try.
I would ensure that everyone started placing a premium on the research of facts. I think that one of the things that makes America great is our diversity of opinions on literally everything. I think that's the only way you can have innovation in any direction. And I think that our adversaries and partisan folks from all walks of life actually use that against us to leverage our desire to have our biases confirmed with misinformation from time to time or misrepresented information. And anytime that happens, it actually takes away from the value of the opinion or the outlook itself. And as I look around today, I see a lot of, great outlooks that are marred by, patent lies or patent third-party misinformation. And that makes it less likely that people who don't share that view will be able to take you seriously. So that's what I would change is I would have everyone start focusing on quality assurance, quality control on the information that they're putting out first so that these conversations that we're having that are extremely important, in those conversations we can focus on the actual outlook rather than whether or not the thing that someone's telling me is true or false.
Thinking through that question and realizing if my change happened, would I exist? And for me, that's such an essential question to answer because being multiracial, I believe I would go back and have slavery never happen. How does that affect America today? As we look at the geopolitical situation, looking at my little brother as he grows up, a person of color with black skin, and the things he's gone through, and then looking at myself as a person of color with white skin and realizing that making that sacrifice and making that change would be something that's so important and dear to my heart, as well as to help America heal.
If you could give a commencement speech for the class of 2019, what would you tell them? What do you hope they go on to do?
Since D-Day is coming up and, you're a paratrooper out of the 173rd, I did a few jumps in my day. I would say that your D-Day is here and, it's time to jump. It's time to find out where your objective is when you hit the ground and go out and pursue that to the best of your ability. And while I say that, I will also say that, maybe your objective isn't the one that everyone else is running towards, and only you could figure that out. So it's up to us to find our objective and go and give 110% as we try to make it there and win.
One of the things that I've loved about the military and that I hope I brought to the foster community is to help your neighbors, take care of your shipmates, as we would say in the Navy. We don't have enough of that nowadays. I think it's important to extend a helping hand to the person right next to you, to have that camaraderie and have that community. So take every day to be able to give back to the person who helps you get somewhere further and your neighbors.
Man, that's a big question. First of all, I would hate to give the commencement speech. I hate public speaking. So I would say no. But if I had to be there, if I had to tell people, thinking back on when I was talking about how divisive the country is, I think maybe one of the reasons and one of the good things about that is that today's youth or the young people growing up, I guess it's not all young people that are graduating. I'm graduating too. There's a lot of optimism there. People are pushing for a lot of social change that needs to be addressed that hasn't been talked about in a long time. So I would just tell them to keep working on that. Don't get jaded. I know it's kind of corny and cliche, but keep some of that idealism as you go through life and keep working on those issues.
I would tell them not to give up. I would tell them that they've got some incredibly hard days ahead of them and that the easiest day in their lives is today. and that they just need to lean on each other and support one another, and that their friends are going to have their backs, and that they're never alone. I hope what this class goes on to do is that they change the world and that they find the tallest mountain, find the biggest challenges, and go at them 150%. And that this generation is going to be, in my opinion, hopefully is going to be the new greatest generation. We're going to be the generation that solves climate change, that tackles all of these massive global issues. And it's on us and it's on our shoulders, and there's no need to blame anybody for where we're at right now or to get down on ourselves. We've solved incredibly huge challenges as a human species, and there's nothing that's in front of us right now that isn't surmountable. So don't give up, don't quit, find the tallest mountain, and keep on pushing.
I think I'd want to tell them that we're the future. I know it sounds like cliche, but like we're the ones that are going to take over from our parents, and so we're going to have to take care of the world that we're in as well as take care of them. And so I think there's a lot of frustration on my part as well as a lot of other people's of like where we're at in the world and where we're going. But I think it's something that we need to work on helping people kind of age gracefully, because there's going to be a lot more older people throughout our time as our population ages, and then also being willing to make big moves and big changes to try to stop climate change and keep the world around for our kids, because there is changes. There's a lot of issues that come from it, and if we don't make some changes, we're gonna deal with the consequences, and our kids may not even be able to make those choices to deal with those consequences if we don't do something. So
I always, think about this every time I've gone to commencements and watch people speak, and just wondering, what are they going to tell us? Like, what's new that we're going to hear? That, always telling us go out and do great things, go out and change the world. And I always think, that's just such the question. That's what everybody tells us. But being here at UW and taking some classes outside of my normal executive program, where I was actually taking classes with those who are in the full-time program and being with, the regular students, just seeing like the energy they have, just seeing where they want to go, and it's almost a little sense of like a naiveness, like they want to change the world, and I think that's such a great thing that for them to want to go out there and have that energy. That unfortunately that's the best speech to give, and that's what I would tell them is you have that opportunity. You're the next generation coming up. You can make the changes for us, for your children, because for us who are my age and generation before us, like our time is done. Like there's changes we can make to an extent, but the world is yours. That's coming up next. And along with that, I would tell them, get out there and vote, get out there and run for public office, get out there and make a difference in your community. This is a country that was founded upon a community founded upon us making a difference, not just for ourselves, but each person within our community, each person in our state, each person in our identities. When you have that privilege to be able to make a difference, please don't squander it and take that opportunity to do so.
So what have you learned from running this podcast for the past couple of years along with Joy?
So a big piece that I've learned doing the podcast is that I had a lot of self-doubt around just the technical aspects associated with editing, with recording, with all of the equipment and whatnot. And I think that's a big barrier for people when they think about doing something big like this and really trying to make a splash with how they choose to get their message out or influence people. And I would say if I can learn it, you can learn it, and that it's really not that steep of a barrier. So that's been a huge piece, and definitely something that those skills are something that I feel like I'm really going to carry with me from here on out. And then the second big piece is that some of the best stories in the world and in America are completely unheard because the right people are not in front of the camera or in front of the microphone. And I absolutely loved the opportunity to get people that have been historically misrepresented and underrepresented in front of a microphone and to hear their stories. And I won't trade those experiences for the world. So.